In this tutorial, we will add the Read Insurance Agents functionality to our insurance administration application. Here we will use the Spring framework and the Spring JDBC template to read a list of insurance agents from the MariaDB table. We will do all of this within a new insurance agent Spring service implementation and a new Struts to agent action. For my YouTube students, there will be a link in the description to my Udemy course where you will be able to download the source code for all the examples. These are the high-level steps we will do to get our read agent functionality. First, we will reuse our existing project. Then we will create an insurance agent model object. Then we will add the insurance service interface. And for now, we'll just have a get all insurance agent method. We will get to a very important part, which is adding the Spring configuration. This means changing our web.xml so that the Spring listener can be added, changing our pom.xml for all the Spring dependencies, and also creating a Spring configuration class. Now, once our Spring configuration class is working, we can implement the insurance service using the Spring JDBC template. Then we will test our implementation of the Spring framework using a main method test driver. The reason we use a main method test driver is to make sure that all our configurations are correct. And finally, we will add the insurance action and the display list JSP. So let's move over to Eclipse. All right, so we'll start off by renaming our project. And we'll make sure to rename everything that Eclipse missed. Looks like everything has been renamed, so now we will do a Maven update, a Maven build, and run it. Our Maven build succeeded, so now we will run it. Looks like everything is working, so we are ready to move on. So now let's go back to our data source and our database connection and our insurance admin database. And we'll run the select from insurance agent. We want to display this list of agents in our application. So the first thing we'll have to do is create a model object that will match our insurance agents table. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we create a new model package. And then inside the package, we create our agent model object. And this is what it looks like. It matches to our table. We will now create the insurance admin service package. And here we will add the agent service interface. The only method that we will have in our interface is to get all the agents. And let's go ahead and create the outline of the agent service implementation class. For a fully functioning implementation, we are going to use the Spring JDBC template. and the Spring framework, which means we now have to add all of our Spring dependencies to our POM file. We will use Spring version 4.3.2.5 release, and in order to get Spring working with Struts 2, we need the Spring Struts 2 plugin. Then we need the Spring JDBC package, we need the Spring context support, the web NVC, and the Spring web package. And we're also going to have to add our MariaDB JDBC client. We also add the servlet Java standard tag library of 1.2. Now that should cover all our Spring dependencies. Next up, we will have to add the Spring configuration to our web.xml file so that our Struts 2 application can make use of the Spring framework. So let's add the Spring listener to our web.xml. Here we've added the Spring framework request contact listener, listen to incoming requests. Then we've added the context class of an annotation configuration application context. And we're going to have to add our Spring JDBC config class. And we also added a context load listener. Let's move the welcome files up. Now let's move on to creating our Spring config package and our Spring JDBC config class. So first, let's add our data source Spring Bean to our config class. And here we can see we make use of the JDBC driver that will give us a data source to our insurance admin database. Next, we will add the Spring JDBC Template bean. And as you can see, we define our data source as part of the JDBC template bean. And then finally, we define our Spring service implementation bean. And we have not yet defined the setter for the JDBC template inside of our agent service implementation. So let's go ahead and do that. The service is a Spring component. Now in the getAllAgents method, we are going to use the Spring JDBC template to get the list of insurance agents from the Maria table. So let's just pause here and step back for a bit. First, what is the Spring JDBC template? Well, as the name implies, it provides you with a template to access your relational database via JDBC. You can also use JDBC directly, but that will mean you've got to code all the database access code yourself, which means a lot of try-catch blocks around opening and closing and ultimately managing database connections. For those of you interested to investigate the Spring JDBC template deeper, I will provide external links. Also, as the agent service implementation class is annotated as a Spring component, it has to be configured as one in order for the Spring dependency injection framework to recognize it, which means that our web.xml listeners has to be set up correctly. And if we look at them, we see that they are set up to use an annotation context class as we have defined in the Spring JDBC config class. So here it specifies the annotation config and here it specifies the Spring JDBC config class, which means we specify all of our Spring beans to be injected via annotations. And obviously, since this is a configuration class, we have to annotate the class as well. So we'll annotate it as a configuration class. And because it gets these classes or beans in our packages, we have to also annotate it as a component scan. And that takes care of setting up our configuration correctly between our class, our web.xml, our service component, which uses the JDBC component, which means we can now implement the getAllAgent. I will paste in the getAllAgents code and walk through it. So as you can see, we use our standard select all from insurance agent SQL query. We pass it into a query for list method of our JDBC template, and it will return to us a list of map objects, and then we will iterate through each of these maps, key values. We will get all the values back from the database and populate our agent, and then finally we will add our agent, our own list, and return the list. Let's see what the JDBC template method does for us. See in the documentation, let's see if we can get into the code. And as we go deeper into the code, we finally get to where we see all the management of the result sets and the queries are done for us inside of the template. That's why when we go back to our class, we don't see any opening and closing of database connection. Now we are ready to test our getAllAgents methods. So for that, we are going to use a main method test driver. So we'll create the main package. And inside the main package, we'll create a Spring main class. And we will create a main method to test our Spring service implementation. So this is how we are going to test our service implementation. We are using the annotation config application context to get the configuration from the Spring JDBC config class. Then we create the agent service interface by getting the agent service bean, and we name it the agent service. And then we call the getAllAgents to return to us an agent list. And we iterate through all of the agents in the agent list, and we print out all the agents. So let's see what happens. So this time we run it as a Java application. And we have a success. This shows that our configuration was set up correctly and we get all the values back, although it seems like we might have a problem with ID value. So I have to look at that. So going back to our agent ID, we see that we need to actually get agent underscore ID from the table instead of ID. That's probably why we got that null values. So let's run our Spring main test driver again. We'll run it as a Java application. And of course, the agent ID is not an integer, but a string. So we'll have to parse this string. Let's compile and test. And that looks good. There we finally get our ID string back. Now that we know our Spring JDBC code work, we can implement our new action to get the agents and a new JSP to list all the agents. First, we will go to our Struts configuration file, which is insurance.xml, and we'll add our new action definition in here. So we're going to name the action list and our action class agent action. And in this instance, we are going to call the list method. And on success, it will forward to our new agents.jsp. So let's go ahead and create our new agent action class. Our agent action will extend action support. It will implement the preparable interface and our own administration aware interface. And now we can fill in our logic. So here we've added our agent service. We've added the current administrator so that we can make use of the set administrator. And then we add a getter and setter for our agent service interface. We also add a single agent and a list of agent definitions. First, let's implement the administrator aware interface. For now, we will leave the prepare method empty. Let's create getters and setters for agent and agents. And now we'll add the list method. So what we do here is we get all the agents using the service and we return success. Now going back to our configuration, success is going to forward to insurance agents.jsp. So let's go ahead and add that. And we'll have to replace all of this with Struts 2 encoding. As you can see, we are going to make use of a simple style sheet. This is what our style sheet will look like. Adding some property text inside our body. And now we'll add the table that will list all of the agents. So we use a header text row, and then we use the list of agents that we get back from the action, and we iterate through it. Now I will skip over the Maven update and the Maven clean package, and I will run it directly so we can have a look at our end result. Insurance admin. List agents. And that looks good. It looks like we still need to do some work on our property header names, but it looks like we did get our insurance agents back from the database. And that concludes our Get All Insurance Agents tutorial.